Okay, who's the first group? Anong first topic na ire-report nyo?
Hindi po ata kami nakaano po sino pong mauuna.
Okay. Ganito na lang. Opening prayer muna tayo, then decide kung anong group yung mauuna. Who wants to lead the opening prayer? Anyone who wants to lead the opening prayer?
Sige po, ako na lang po ulit.
Okay, Akay. Miss Akay, thank you.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Do not lead us into test, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay. Okay, shall we start for the reporting? Who's the first group? Hello, guys. Who's the first group? The first. Okay. Can someone share the slides na?
Wait lang po, ma'am. Sorry po sa inconvenience.
Okay. It's okay. Then, tingnan nyo na kung sino yung next reporter. Isa lang ba yung slides nyo or individually gumawa kayo ng slides?
Kanya-kanya po per group.
Okay. Sige. It's okay.
Good morning po, ma'am. So today, we will be reporting about the expanded program for immunization. Next slide, please. So for the presentation outline, first we have the introduction to EPI, the global scenario, the objectives or goals of EPI, the mandate, strategies, outcomes or accomplishments of EPI, and lastly, the future plan and action. So, the Expanded Program on Immunization, or EPI, was established in the year 1976. This is to ensure that the infants or children and mothers have access to routinely recommended infant or childhood vaccines. 6 vaccine preventable diseases were initially included in the EPI, which are tuberculosis, poliomyelitis, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and measles. And the vaccine under the EPI are BCG, birth dose, hepatitis B, birth dose, oral poliovirus vaccine, pentavalent vaccine, measles-containing vaccines, and tetanus toxoid. And in the year 2014, pneumococcal pneumococcal, I'm not sure for sa pronunciation po, conjugate vaccine 13 was included in the routine immunization
Pneumococcal.
of sorry po.
Yes, it's
So,
correct.
okay. So a World Health this is a World Health Organization goal. Its aim is to make vaccines available to all infants and children. And the goal of the DOH is to reduce morbidity and mortality among children against the most common vaccine preventable disease. Also, it encompasses procedures such as vaccination, and this aims to control and eventually eradicate these infections with a special focus on decreasing in incidence of these infectious diseases and associated deaths. And in the year 2016, the expanded program on immunization will transition to wait, I'm sorry, will transition to become the National Immunization Program. It will include immunization of other populations such as senior citizen immunization, school age immunization, and adolescent immunization. So today it is now called the National Immunization Program. So next slide, please. So what expanded means? So expanding the number of diseases to be covered. So dati, six lang siya, 'di ba? So now, mas dumami na yung mga vaccines na nakilala kasi marami mga diseases ang nade-develop ng mother pati ng infant. Next, the expanding number of children and target population to be covered. So as much as possible, hindi lang sila nagta-target ng isang area lang. Ang goal nila is to target the whole world.
Mm-mm.
And lastly, nag-expand din ang coverage to all concerns. Next slide, please.
Just wait, guys. Pwedeng pa-open ang camera while reporting para makita ko kung sino yung nagre-report. Thank you. Yung reporter.
Wait lang po. In-on ko po yung cam.
Okay.
So for the global statistics, there has been a global decline in vaccine-preventable diseases due to increased vaccination. The burden of vaccine-preventable diseases in any country is greatly influenced by the uptake of childhood vaccinations and the strength of its immunization program. The morbidity and mortality due to these vaccine-preventable diseases have declined significantly after the introduction of the EPI. So when EPI was initiated in 1974, fewer than 5% of children in developing countries were receiving a third dose of DPT or diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, and poliomyelitis vaccines in their first year of life. So now these coverage levels surpass 50% in developing countries, and millions of cases of the target disease have been prevented. Next slide po. So this is the chart for the cases of vaccine preventable diseases from 1980 to 2019. So in the early 1980s, thousands of vaccine preventable diseases cases were recorded every year, particularly for measles and pertussis. And then by the mid 1990s, the number of these VPD cases and deaths have declined or lowered sharply. The Philippines was also certified to have eliminated polio in year 2000, as well as eradicated maternal and neonatal tetanus in 2017. Next slide po. So the WHO estimates that 2 to 3 million deaths are prevented every year through immunizations against diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, and measles. So this is the chart of the global number of child deaths per year by cause of death. In the chart, we can see that the global number of deaths of children younger than 5 years per year from 1990 to 2017. So, the chart shows yung reduction ng child deaths over this 25-year period. And this was achieved by a reduction of the number of deaths from vaccine preventable diseases, the number of child deaths caused by diseases for which vaccines are available declined from before is 5.1 million deaths in 1990, and then it became to 1.8 million deaths 27 years later. So the two vaccines that are mainly responsible for this, for the lowering of the cases and for saving millions per year, is DTP against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, and MMR against measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines. So before the measles vaccines was introduced in 1963, measles has already caused a large number of deaths globally, and this is estimated at least 2.6 million per year. And then because of the vaccines and because about 86% of the world population is already immunized today, the number of people killed by measles has been lowered or cut dramatically to an estimated 95% deaths in 2017. So tetanus and pertussis were also previously much bigger killers, with pertussis affecting children younger than 5 years, and then tetanus for the newborns. And then these cases have been killing at least an estimated of 787,000 newborns in 1988, and then it lowered to 49,000 in 2013. Next slide po. So this is the chart for the rate of cases of polio versus the vaccination coverage. Um, Polio is targeted for global eradication, especially in the EPI, and then this has become possible through the polio vaccine that was developed in 1955. So the WHO has estimated that in 2015, 85% of the infants around the world received 3 doses of polio vaccine, and then the number of paralytic polio cases have then decreased by 99% since then, since 1980s, from 350,000 to 400,000 paralytic cases per year, and then it lowered down to only 22 reported cases in 2017. Next po. So this is the successful eradication of smallpox. One of the greatest successes of global health is the eradication of smallpox disease due to vaccination and immunization. Smallpox is an infectious disease caused by the variola virus. This is a major cause of mortality in the past, with historic records of outbreaks around the world. And then it was successfully eradicated in 1980 thanks to the Global Vaccination Program, or the EPI. Smallpox is the only human disease that has been successfully eradicated, and the smallpox vaccine was the first successful vaccine that was developed.
So for our objectives and goals for API, our overall goal is to reduce the morbidity and mortality among children against the most common vaccine preventable diseases such as tuberculosis, poliomyelitis, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and measles. While our specific objectives and goals, first is to achieve 100% coverage with all EPI vaccines. And for next slide, next is to reduce incidence of bacterial meningitis and also to and meningitis is
Bacterial.
is a condition that affects the thin membranes that cover a person's brain and spinal cord. And children at particular risk for this includes those with sickle cell disease and those lacking with spleen. And next, a specific objective is prevention of tuberculosis. And it is a disease which are caused by germs that are spread from person to person through the air, and usually it affects the lungs, and it also can affect other body parts such as the brain, kidneys, or the spine. And those who doesn't get treatment could possibly lead to death. And the next is to maintain zero level of diphtheria, which is a serious infection caused by a strain of uh, bacteria, and this diphtheria is makes a toxin which is poisonous and can cause difficult breathing or heart failure, paralysis, and even death. And the next is to maintain immunization for safety. And next slide.
So for the mandate po, let us first discuss a brief overview of the mandates of the Philippine Immunization Program. So according to the Article 12, Section 11 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution, it states that the state shall adopt a comprehensive approach to health development, which shall endeavor to make essential goods, health, and other social services available to all people at affordable cost. There shall be a priority for the needs of the underprivileged, sick, elderly, disabled, women, and children. So next, dito nagbunga yung Presidential Decree or PD number 996. It required compulsory basic immunization for infants and children below 8 years old. So this was implemented last September 16, 1976. So, after nito, nagkaroon ng Proclamation number 46 which reaffirmed the country's commitment to the universal goal of eradicating polio by 2000, which is through mother and child immunization. And then yung Republic Act number 7846 which required compulsory immunization against hepatitis B for children under 8 years old. This amends the purpose of PD number 996, yung binanggit ko kanina na basic immunization for infants and children below 8 years old. So this basic immunization to be provided is against tuberculosis, diphtheria, pertussis and tetanus, poliomyelitis, which is against
Poliomyelitis.
ayan, measles, rubella, hepatitis B in newborns within 24 hours after birth, and provision of other basic immunization services. So next naman, after nito, dito na nagbunga yung expanded program of on Immunization or yung tinatawag natin na EPI. So yung Presidential Proclamation number 6, this is in response to the United Nations goal of universal child immunization by 1990, which is, ito na yung pinaka-implementation niya. And then what guided it was the DOH Administrative Order number 39 S 2003, which guided the nationwide implementation of the expanded program on immunization. This was implemented last April 21, 2003. And then dito na yung final na pinirmahan ni President Benigno Aquino III on July 26, 2010, which is the Republic Act number 10152, or the Mandatory Infants and Children Health Immunization Act of 2011. So this mandatory includes the basic immunization for children under 5, which is against VPDs, including yung mga TB, DPT, yung mga sinabi ko lang kanina. So nadagdag lang dito is yung influenza type B. So next slide.
Okay, so for these strategies, conduct of routine immunization for infants, children, women through reaching every barangay strategy. REB strategy is an adaptation of the WHO UNICEF reaching every district, was introduced in 2004, aimed to improve the access to routine immunization and reduce dropouts. There are five components of this strategy, namely data analysis for action, re-establish outreach services, strengthen links between the community and services, supportive supervision, and maximizing sources. The strategies for reaching every barangay can be put into action at all levels by incorporating all five components into action, which is adopt a barangay focus for assessment, problem solving, planning, budgeting, and implementation, adopting a proposed barangay routine coverage of at least 95% of fully immunized children, prioritizing barangay focus based on number of unimmunized children, providing adequate funding to districts to improve access to high quality immunization services, and ensure sufficient capacity building. So for the supplemental immunization activity, supplementary immunization activities are used to reach children who have not been vaccinated or have not developed sufficient immunity after previous vaccinations. It can be conducted either national or subnational in selected areas. Supplementary immunization activity campaigns provide children with an additional dose of measles vaccine and deliver other child health intervention including vitamin A supplements and oral polio vaccines. Next slide, please. So for the strengthening vaccine preventable diseases surveillance is conducted for all vaccine preventable diseases, most especially for measles caused and indigenous wild poliovirus. The value of VPD surveillance is to identify outbreak quickly for immediate action, to identify unreached and under-immunized population, to monitor progress towards global and regional disease elimination and eradication goals for polio and measles, to determine disease burden and epidemiology to inform decision making about vaccine introductions, to generate evidence on vaccine impact, and to guide optimal use of vaccines such as defining high-risk populations. Next slide, please.
For the outcomes and accomplishment. The immunization program has been carried out in the Philippines over the past 40 years with the following milestones. The immunization program was officially launched in 1976. The BCG vaccine against TB was given to school entrants. Vaccines against poliomyelitis, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and measles followed after the program. Comprehensive program implementation review was conducted in 1986. The results of the review revealed that the coverage was still less than optimal. In 1989, the country accomplished for the first time the universal child immunization goal of 90%, 1 year ahead of the targeted date. The Philippines, together with other nations, pledged to attain three immunization global goals by 1995. The first one is the eradication of poliomyelitis. Second is the elimination of neonatal tetanus. And the third one is the control of the measles. In the year 2000, the Philippines reached polio-free status. The country also completed the second validation for the declaration of neonatal tetanus elimination in 2014. Supplementary immunization campaigns or SIA against measles were conducted beginning 1998, followed by the nationwide campaigns in 2004, 2007, 2011, and 2014. In the past 3 years, the country has increased the scope and coverage of national immunization program by adding new vaccines for the children and women and including other age groups like school children, adolescents, youth, and the elderly.
So here is a timeline of the milestones of the immunization program in the Philippines or yung mga vaccine na inintroduce ng program since 1976. So una-una, yung BCG was first administered among school entrants and DPT was introduced in priority areas. Then in 1979, BCG and DPD was provided nationwide, and the OPV and tetanus toxoid, or also known as TT, for pregnant women was provided in high-risk areas. And then in 1980, the OPV and the TT was provided nationwide, and 1982 naman, the MV was provided among 35% of the eligible population. And then in 1983, since nag-progress na siya, naging nationwide na yung distribution niya. And in 1992, hepatitis B vaccine was provided among 40% of the eligible population, and in 2005, it was provided nationwide. So following this, in 2010, the MMR was administered in selected areas, and the Penta or DTWP, hepatitis B, and HIB was administered in three selected regions. And in 2012 naman, it was administered nationwide, and nagkaroon na din ng rotavirus vaccine among children in indigenous families. And then anti-influenza vaccine and PPV-23 was also provided for indigenous senior citizens. Next is yung sa 2013, yung TD and MR vaccines was provided in high schools in selected high-risk provinces and cities. Then nagkaroon ng second dose for the MMR, which was provided for children 12 to 15 months of age. And then in 2014, the PCV13 vaccine was introduced in 5 selected regions, and the HPV vaccine was introduced naman in pilot areas in CAR and Region 7. And in 2015, the PV vaccine provided in the National Capital Region, Regions 3, 6, and 7. Then yung TD and MR vaccines na kanina in high school selected in high-risk provinces lang, ngayon in all public schools with children na nasa 6 to 7 years old and 11 to 12 years. Next is yung HPV vaccine. It was provided in 20 priority provinces among females of age 9 to 10 years old. Then yung BCV, nagkaroon din ng provision na na-expand to 14 regions, which excluded the National Capital Region, Regions 4A and 4B. Then in 2016, nagkaroon ng switch from TOPV to POPV. Yung IPV provision, it expanded to 6 regions naman. And then yung TDMMR vaccines, it was provided to all public schools and magkaroon din ng HPV vaccination na nag-expand to 48 provinces. And then finally, yung MV, it was replaced with MMR vaccine. And then yung TT vaccine for CBAW was replaced with TD. And yung anti-influenza vaccine and PPV 23 was provided for all senior citizens at ages 60 to 65 years. So this information was from the National Immunization Program Manual of Operations from the Department of Health. Continuing on with the outcomes and accomplishments, so it is required that all health facilities and including health centers and barangay health stations should have at least one health staff trained on the reaching every barangay REB strategy. Yun yung nabanggit kanina ni Amber. So unang-una, yung polio eradication, it is one of the achievements since October 2000, the Philippines has maintained a polio-free status. So to provide and produce the required herd immunity protection against polio. So, kailangan ng country ng at least 95% of the oral polio vaccine or OPV dose coverage. But nakita nagkaroon ng decline in OPV3 since 2008 from 91% to 83%. So, a decreasing acute flaccid paralysis or AFP rate may indicate that the country may not be able to find true cases of polio and may possibly experience a resurgence of cases. So, yung sa case natin, yung AFP rate natin has decreased from 1.44 in 2010 to 1.3 in 2011. So, Region 3 5, and 7 were the only regions that have declined or that have achieved the AFP rate of 2 out of 100,000 children below the age of 15. With this, there is an ongoing polio mass immunization to all children 6 weeks to 59 months of old age in the top 10 highest risk areas for neonatal tetanus in the country. This is the Abra, Benguet, Isabela City, Basilan, Lanao Norte, Cotabato City, Maguindanao, Lanao Sur, Marawi City, and Sulu. So next accomplishment natin is yung measles elimination. So the country has conducted 4 rounds of mass measles campaign, which happened during the 1998, 2004, 2007, and 2011. So in 2009, nagkaroon ng two-dose measles-containing vaccine or MCV. So this includes the following doses. So the first dose is the MCV1 or the monovalent measles, which is given to ages 9 to 11 months old, and yung MCV2 or yung MMR vaccine given to ages 12 to 15 months old. So nagkaroon din ng laboratory surveillance, which is for the confirmation of measles. And paano siya ito ginagawa? So kumukuha ng blood samples from the patients suspected with measles to confirm the case. So nagkaroon din ng Iligtas sa Tigtas ang Pinas, which is a supplemental immunization campaign for measles and rubella, or also known as German measles, last April to June of 2011. So through this campaign, 15.6 million or 84% out of 1.5 million children ages 9 months to 8 years old received one dose of the measles rubella or MR vaccine. For the successful conduct of the MR campaign, 635.7 million was spent by the Philippine government. So to validate naman yung immunization coverage, a rapid coverage assessment were conducted in several areas. This is to assess high-quality vaccination and to make sure that there are no missed children in each barangay. So pipili sila ng barangay randomly and then itetest. So out of 3,494 barangays with a population of 1,000 and above na randomly selected, yung overall RCA results nila was 97.6% or 70,594 out of the 72,353 children ages 9 months to 8 years old were vaccinated. So measles is then said to be eliminated if we have one case per million or below 100 cases in a year. So next part will be discussed by CK.
Okay, so for the next one is the maternal and neonatal tetanus elimination. 3 rounds of tetanus vaccination are currently ongoing in the 10 highest areas. An estimated 1 million of women aged 15 to 40 years old, regardless of their tetanus immunization, will receive vaccines during this round. The funds will be coming from the Kiwanis International through UNICEF and World Health Organization. Control of other common vaccine-preventable diseases such as diphtheria, pertussis, hepatitis B, and meningitis, encephalitis secondary to H influenza type B. There was a continuous vaccination for infants and children with the DPP or the combination of these vaccines of EP Annual Accomplishment Report. DOH procures all the vaccines, needles, and syringes for the immunization that is targeted to infants, children, and mothers. Next slide, please. Hepatitis B control. Republic Act number 10152 has been signed, is known as the Mandatory Infants and Children's Health Immunization Act of 2011. Sorry for that busy. This requires that all children under the age of 5 years old should be given with basic immunization against vaccine-preventable diseases. Specifically, this bill provides for all infants to be given the birth dose of hepatitis B vaccine within 24 hours of birth. DOH also used a strategy to strengthen hepatitis B coverage by integrating birth dose in the Essential Intrapartum and Newborn Care Package or IENC. In 2011, 11 tertiary hospitals are already IENC compliant. The goal of hepatitis B control is to reduce the chronic hepatitis B infection rate as measured by hepatitis B surface antigen prevalence to less than 1% in the 5-year-olds after routine vaccination. So there's the table indicating yung prevalent hepatitis B coverage. Next slide, please. Vaccines and cold chain management. Upgraded the cold chain equipment in the 80 provinces, 38 cities, and 16 regions since 2003. There was an effective vaccine management assessment that's conducted last December 2011 and revealed cold chain capacity gaps from the national up to the implementers level. There was a total of 267 million pesos required to address the gaps that were identified during the assessment. The last one is the introduction of new vaccines. For 2012, rotavirus and pneumococcal vaccines will be introduced in the National Immunization Program. Immunization will be prioritized among the infants of the families listed in the National Housing and Targeted System for Poverty Reduction nationwide. The government of the Philippines has allocated 1.6 billion for the procurement of the two vaccines.
Hello. So for the future plan and action, first is the strengthening the cold chain to support the immunization program. So first, what is cold chain? The cold chain is a set of rules and procedures that ensure the proper storage and distribution of vaccines to health services from the national to the local level. The cold chain is interconnected with refrigeration equipment that allows vaccines to be stored at recommended temperatures to maintain their potency. So here is the illustration of a cold chain system. The series of the arrows at the bottom of the figure show the flow of vaccines down to the health facilities. The series at the top show where data are collected, recorded, checked, and analyzed, and how reporting information flows back up the chain. Following this sequence ensure that cold chain performance is properly monitored and the necessary information is gathered to aid vaccine forecasting. So in the Philippines, vaccines and immunization supplies are stored and managed at different locations. It is therefore important to plan and coordinate the delivery of vaccines and other immunization supplies to ensure that all health centers and other service delivery points are provided with adequate vaccines, correct diluents, and adequate syringes, droppers, and safety boxes. Next slide. So for the capacity building for health workers for introduction of new vaccines, there are four categories, which are the national, which is the primary level, regional, secondary level, province or city, intermediate level, and health center, health facility, or health post as peripheral level. So for the national primary level, depending on the capacity required, cold or freezer rooms, refrigerators, cold boxes, and in some cases, refrigerated trucks for transport. For the regional, depending on the capacity required, the secondary level generally uses equipment similar to the primary level, such as cold or freezer rooms, refrigerators, cold boxes, and in some cases refrigerated trucks for transportation. So for the province or city and the intermediate level, depending on the capacity required, cold or freezer room and or freezers, refrigerators, cold boxes, and in some cases refrigerated trucks for transportation are used at this level. And lastly, for the health center, health facility, or health post in peripheral level, depending on the capacity required, refrigerators in certain cases with water pack freezing or cooling compartment, cold boxes, and vaccines carriers are needed at this level. For the next slide. So next is advocacy for the financial sustainability for the newly introduced vaccine expansion. So financial sustainability plans or FSP were developed by over 50 of the world's poorest countries receiving funding support from the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization or GAVI to introduce new and underused vaccines, injection safety, and immunization service support between 2000 and 2006. These plans were analyzed with respect to the strategies selected to promote financial sustainability, allowing the strict classification of FSP strategies in three areas, which are the mobilizing additional resources, increasing the reliability of resources, and improving program efficiency. Despite some country successes and the magnitude of planned financial sustainability strategies, huge funding gaps remain for these countries due to the initial underlying assumptions of the GAVI and financial sustainability plan model. Next slide. For the developmental of the comprehensive multi-year plan for immunization program, the comprehensive multi-year plan 2016 to 2020 is developed as a part of standard cycle of a long-term EPI planning and as a partial requirement for receipt of Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization Support. The plan is developed within the framework of the Global Immunization Vision and Strategy and Global Vaccine Action Plan to ensure sustainable development of the API program. So here is the picture of the new vaccine. So next slide. So additional lang po is the update action plan for global COVID vaccination. Share more sooner, make more quicker, build in the global south, and support delivery systems. So share more sooner. Many countries with access to affordable vaccines have a surplus and should share with countries who do not have easy access to them. Make more quicker despite a surplus. The world needs far more vaccines and fast. An immediate investment in expanding capacity could pay dividends with 6 months. Build in the global south, countries with production capacities should invest quickly in technology transfer to expand manufacturing capacity around the world. Countries without should be identified for assistance and building long term. And last is the support delivery systems, which building the support systems to deliver and administer vaccines in developing countries must be fast-tracked and established in a way that benefits public health for decades to come. So that would be all for our report po.
Okay, that's the end of EPI. Hello.
Yes po, yes po.
Okay, we will have at least 30 minutes break and then the next reporter is Halamang Gamot. Okay?
Okay po, ma'am.
Then we will have a recitation about EPI later. Pero madali lang naman siya. About din dun sa mga diniscuss nyo. Okay, see you after 30 minutes. So I think it's 10. 10 o'clock. Okay.